There we go. Thank you. Okay,
Ready? And we are recording the public hearing?
we
Yes.
are recording.
Yes, meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome everybody, folks online, folks in the room. Thank you all for coming. What a great showing. Sometimes these are a total ghost town when we have these hearings. So it's nice to see this level of participation. This is what this is all about, is getting feedback. That's why we're required to do it in statute. So tonight, a little bit about the order of operations. Our project manager, Stephanie Burke, is going to walk us through a presentation that's going to last anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. So we're going to ask you guys to sort of hold questions and comments until after, and then we will open the floor and try to have an organized discussion and get to everybody both online and in person. For folks online, please keep yourself muted until you are until we open up the comment period, and then we'd ask that you use the raise hand function or the chat whenever possible. So with that, we'll just jump right in, and I'll turn it over to Stephanie Burke. So thank you all.
Great, thanks, Devin. So everyone's here tonight for the first public hearing for the draft Rutland Regional Plan. And in terms of the presentation portion of tonight's hearing, I'll give you kind of a quick walkthrough of what we're going to cover. We're going to start with a little recap of our planning process, highlighting some key milestones in the plan development, as well as our engagement strategy and report. We'll then talk about the plan's purpose and design, kind of remind everybody, what the plan is and why it's important. Then we'll jump into the plan itself in terms of what's being proposed. We'll talk about kind of the general structure of the plan and how we're demonstrating statutory conformance. Provide an overview of the plan chapters and the planning goals, because they're quite extensive. And then we'll do a little bit deeper dive into the land use chapter and its companion piece, the regional future land use map. We'll use that to talk a little bit about the state designation areas and eligible tier 1B areas. And then I'll wrap up with a little discussion regarding the implementation of this plan, and with a focus on how we're going to be converting the regional vision into action. So in terms of the planning process, we started off in March of 2023. And that first phase in the planning, we had a housing needs assessment completed by the Vermont Housing Finance Authority for the Rutland region. We developed our engagement strategy, and then we kind of kicked everything off with our staff at a retreat in October. From there, we moved into the real drafting part of the planning process. That ran from roughly November of 23 through August of 25. And it was during the drafting phase where we implemented our engagement strategy. So the first phase of our engagement, which we titled Learn and Assess, we completed between January and April of 2024. In this phase of engagement, we got a shared understanding of the baseline conditions in the region, along with the strengths, assets, and challenges that existed. From there, we moved into the second phase of engagement, coinciding with the drafts of the plan. That ran from September through November of 24, where we reported back what we'd heard, and we shared kind of the first working version of the plan with the public to get validation from the region that the plan's policies were on target. We wrapped up our engagement strategy with a third phase, which we called alignment, which we completed between April and June of last year. And at the end of that phase of engagement, we felt strongly that we had a plan and a map that reflected a shared vision for community economic development that was guided by areas designated for growth and conservation based on environmental infrastructure and community factors in the region. And it was all of that work that went into the pre-application draft of our plan. That was kind of the threshold between drafting and the third phase of the planning process, which is adoption. We submitted the pre-application draft of the plan, including the regional future land use map, to the Land Use Review Board in September of 2025. We received the initial pre-application findings from the LURB in November of last year. We incorporated those findings into the draft of the plan that was then shared back with the public in the beginning of January of this year. We held some informational meetings because the findings from the LURB had a significant influence, particularly on our regional future land use map, when we wanted to make sure we were advising the community as early as possible about the implications of those findings. We then quickly followed that up in February with a release of that revised draft plan, including the map, for this first public hearing. That notice went out in February, and here we are tonight, March 17th, with the first hearing. Before I leave this page, I wanted to just let folks know that, you know, we did undertake a pretty significant engagement effort to develop this plan update. And part of that included having a dedicated landing page for accessing all the information related to the plan and the process. And I want to just pull that site up and show you where the report lives for all of the engagement efforts that were undertaken. So this is the landing page. Hopefully some folks have visited this and are a little bit familiar with it. But the draft plan section is here. And the 2026 Regional Plan Engagement Report is available for viewing and downloading here. So I would encourage, if you're interested kind of in the engagement process and what we did to help inform the development of this plan update, I'd encourage you to take a look at that report. So moving into kind of the plan, purpose, and design. Like, what is the plan and why is it important? The plan's a comprehensive 8-year plan to guide and accomplish coordinated and efficient community economic development that balances economic development with social, cultural, environmental priorities. So this plan would, once adopted, would cover from 2026 to 2034. The intention is that this plan is going to help shape the pattern, design, and function of communities in a way to best meet future needs. And at the center of the effort is an analysis of present and future land uses and identifying areas for growth and conservation. So our vision, you know, drawing from what's required in statute for the regional plan, is for it to be a collaborative guide to shaping a healthy, equitable, and resilient region in terms of community economic development. And I feel it's important to note that the plan was designed. The design was informed by the RPC's Declaration of Inclusion and Title VI plan, so that the plan is intended to be flexible in order to best meet the unique needs of the 27 different municipalities in the Rutland region. For those of you who don't know, the Rutland region is defined as all of Rutland County with the exception of Pittsfield. The plan's intended to be locally led in order to increase the probability of success and better ensure that some communities are not favored over others. The plan is intended to be equitable and sustainable. We think those things are really important to achieving economic development goals, and that by embracing diversity, equity, and climate resilience, you know, we'll have a better, we think those things are going to be key to achieving our community economic development goals as a region. And then most importantly, I think we wanted to make sure that this plan is outcome driven to ensure that the goals and policies have clearly defined actions and measures to gauge progress as to how well we're doing as an organization in terms of achieving the goals that we've laid out. So moving on to kind of the structure of the plan and how we're demonstrating that this plan complies with all the statutory requirements. I'm telling you that the plan addresses all the required elements, but we have also, we're also required by the Land Use Review Board to develop a report that demonstrates how we are achieving all of the statutory requirements and state planning goals. And so I'm going to bring you back to our landing page and show you where that report lives, because it's not trivial. So the report demonstrating conformance with state requirements is available in PDF format for viewing or download by clicking on that link. And as you'll see, this is a form developed by the Land Use Review Board that will get submitted with the we had to submit this form with the pre-application draft of the plan, and we'll have to submit this form with the adopted version of the plan. And it basically lays out in 28 pages exactly where you'll find in our plan compliance with all the statutory requirements for state planning goals, as well as regional plan elements. So each of our chapters was very intentionally laid out so that it's easy to read, even though the document is large. So each chapter includes an introduction, which includes a statement of the planning goal for that subject matter. That's followed by a section that describes what it means to be a healthy, equitable, and resilient community from the perspective of that chapter. We then have a section of current conditions, which lays out kind of a baseline of local strengths, assets, and challenges that influence community economic development. And that description of current conditions, of course, was informed by our engagement and regional data. Then that's followed by a description of the future trends or a description of the desired future conditions that we want to try to achieve, and it identifies the drivers of change that are going to be needed to inform decision making and signal when it's time to act. And then finally, we lay out the policies, actions, and indicators. So we have clear and concise regional policy statements for how we're going to achieve the planning goals with realistic actions for the Regional Planning Commission to undertake, and then measurable indicators to monitor progress. And then the final chapters of the plan detail how it aligns with those of our neighbors and present the strategy for plan implementation. So the chapters themselves, as I mentioned, are all kind of focused around the concept of land use. So at the core of our planning effort is that analysis of current land use and the identification of areas that are designated for growth and conservation. And then we look at economic development, cultural resources, transportation, housing, community facilities and public utilities, enhanced energy, working landscape, natural resources, and climate resilience, all attributes of a more comprehensive and holistic community economic development strategy. So all of the plan chapters are intended to kind of coordinate with the land use chapter, as well as with one another. And all of the applicable Vermont statute that lays out all of the plan elements is in Title 24 of Section 4348A. So this is not something that we just as an organization thought was a good idea. This is prescribed in statute. So the community economic development goals, our planning goals, they really reflect the state of affairs that this plan is intended to achieve. So for land use, the goal is to plan development to maintain historic settlement patterns of compact downtown and village centers separated by rural countryside. For economic development, it's to create a strong and diverse economy that provides satisfying and rewarding jobs while maintaining high environmental standards and expanding economic opportunities in areas with high unemployment or low per capita incomes. For cultural resources, our goal is to identify, protect, and preserve significant historic, archaeological, scenic, and cultural resources. For transportation, it's to establish a regional transportation system that incorporates public transit options and paths for pedestrians and bicyclists, ensuring that that system's safe, convenient, economical, energy efficient, and respectful of the natural environment. For housing, we want to ensure the availability of safe and affordable housing for all residents. For community facilities and public utilities, we want to plan for, finance, and provide an efficient system of diverse public facilities and services, including fire and police protection, healthcare services, education and vocational opportunities, public drinking water supply and wastewater treatment, solid waste disposal, childcare, and non-commercial recreation opportunities. For enhanced energy, we want to use energy efficiently, develop renewable energy resources, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. From a working landscape perspective, we want to encourage and strengthen the agricultural and forestry industries. For natural resources, we want to maintain and improve the quality of air, water, wildlife, forests, and other land resources while promoting the wise and efficient use of these natural resources and appropriate extraction of earth and mineral resources. And then finally, in terms of climate resilience, our goal is to enhance the ability of communities to prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate-related impacts, including flooding. So I go over all of those planning goals because they are laid out in statute, and we chose as an organization to essentially mirror the statutory planning goals as our literal goals in the Rutland Regional Plan. So it was very easy to see how we conform with what's required under state statute. So now we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the land use chapter specifically because it, I think, is most impacted by Act 181, which was passed into law in June of 2024 and kind of overhauled and standardized Vermont's land use planning framework. So the goal of the land use chapter is to plan development to maintain the historic settlement pattern of compact downtown and village centers separated by rural countryside. Act 181 introduced all of these new land use categories. There are essentially 7 categories where you're targeting kind of higher density growth, and then 3 rural categories where we're looking at more lower density development or conservation efforts. Act 181 laid out a new state designation program for what I like to call the core 4 land use categories: the downtown center, village center, planned growth area, and village area. So there are going to be new state designations and benefits for downtown centers and village centers. Those areas reflected on the regional future land use map will now be considered centers and receive center designation benefits. And then planned growth areas and village areas will be designated as neighborhoods and will receive neighborhood designation benefits. Act 181 also laid out location-based Act 250 jurisdiction tiers, the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3 areas. And in terms of the regional future land use map, we're interested in the tier 1 eligible areas. The tier 2 and tier 3 areas are subject to a separate rulemaking through the Land Use Review Board. So not really a topic of conversation with regard to the Rutland Regional Plan or the future land use map. So we'll look at kind of the land use categories in relation to the future land use map for the region. We'll start with kind of those 7 categories that are designated for kind of higher density growth. We're currently proposing a total of 38 centers across the region. which is a combination of areas that are mapped as a downtown center or a village center. I've got some statistics here in terms of the percent of the land area and the number of buildings and the number of towns in which those land use categories are mapped. But I'm gonna kind of gloss over that. The punchline being the percentages are pretty small in terms of land area and number of buildings for those two land use categories. We then have the planned growth areas and village areas that will, receive a neighborhood designation, and we've got 16 of those areas currently mapped. And then the punchline in terms of the Act 250 location-based jurisdiction, as far as Tier 1B is concerned, we've got currently 14 towns that are potentially going to have areas eligible for Tier 1B jurisdiction. There's a handful that have some outstanding criteria that they would have to address before we adopt this plan in order to retain that eligibility area. But at the end of the day, 6% of the total land area in the Rutland region is currently mapped in one of these 7 categories, which is really kind of where we're prioritizing higher density growth in the region. In terms of those Tier 1B areas, because that seems to be, a significant change under Act 181. The municipalities that are seeking Tier 1B status would do so through the Regional Planning Commission. They'd submit that request through the Regional Planning Commission, and we would make that request on the town's behalf when we submit our adopted plan to the Land Use Review Board. So again, those Tier 1B areas are in downtowns, village centers, planned growth areas, and village areas. With a Tier 1B designation, Act 250 exemptions would apply to housing and mixed-use development of 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less in the Tier 1B area. And in order to even be eligible for that, the town has to have an approved town plan and planning process. It has to have adopted zoning and subdivision bylaws. It has to the flood hazard areas need to be excluded from the Tier 1B area unless that municipality has adopted both flood hazard area and river corridor bylaws. The area has to have public water supply, wastewater infrastructure, or suitable soils for on-site septic. And the municipality has to have demonstrated capacity to be able to administer development regulations in lieu of Act 250 in these areas. So the towns shown in red, the areas in the 4 towns shown in red are the ones that still have some outstanding criteria that they'd have to button up before we adopt. Otherwise, the areas shown in green and the other municipalities are what we are currently showing as being Tier 1B eligible. And it equates to about 2% of the land area in the region. So moving on to the last 3 categories, which are the rural categories, the rural general, the rural ag forestry, and the rural conservation. They comprise a much larger land area and are really designated to, they're designated areas for growth and conservation that are more, in terms of growth, lower density. Right now it's mapped as about 94% of the land area in the region. And in terms of showing these areas on the map, we do have some paper copies of the map on the walls in the meeting room tonight, but we have an online version of this map back on the landing page. If you scroll to the draft map section, the first public hearing draft can be viewed online by clicking here. And this brings up a more interactive kind of GIS-based map where you can really zoom in to certain areas of interest, and you can see, parcel lines as you move in. And it gives you, can't you see parcel lines as you zoom in?
You should be able to, if not, if you go to the layer, it will toggle.
Oh, yeah, I'm not doing that right now. But anyway, this is the online version of the map where you can really get a lot more specificity if you're interested in a certain area, as opposed to trying to look at a paper version of the map at that scale. So that's kind of the little deeper dive into the land use chapter and its companion piece, the regional future land use map. Now I'm going to wrap up by talking briefly about how we're intending to convert the vision laid out in the plan into action as far as implementation. For the land use chapter, we have policies that support compact and fiscally responsible development. We have actions that guide smart growth through updated planning tools, public input and technical support. And then for all of our topical chapters, we have a multitude of indicators of progress, but the one that we're going to report on in an annual report card is listed at the bottom here. So for land use, that one indicator of progress are the number of downtown and village center designations in the region. For economic development, we have policies that emphasize smart growth and workforce stability. We have actions that target steps that support a robust, sustainable economy, retain local talent, and create growth opportunities for regional employers. And our annual indicator is regional GDP. For cultural resources, our policies encourage adaptive reuse, equitable access, and resilient preservation planning, as well as inclusive cultural programming. Our actions target town planning, expanding partnerships and volunteer capacity, and leveraging GIS and digital archives. And our annual indicator is the number of historic tax credit applications and awards. In transportation, we have policies that promote context-sensitive, complete streets. So any folks on the TAC or that work with your community's highway department understand what complete streets are, as well as roadway safety improvements, strategic upgrades, and resilient planning. The actions focus on advancing key projects, optimizing public transit and active networks, as well as technical assistance. And our indicator of progress for transportation is the annual public transit passenger trips. With housing, our policies promote expanding various housing types, utilizing vacant units, prioritizing low to moderate income households, and our actions focus on achievement of the regional housing targets. And so our annual performance indicator is going to be the total number of housing units. Because at the end of the day, the point of all this work is not to just make a map. I know that a lot of focus and interest goes into the map and how things are, what future land use categories are where, but really, we're trying to designate areas in which certain priorities are going to be furthered to achieve the community economic development goals that run across all of these topics. So in terms of facilities and public utilities, our policies prioritize cost-effective upgrades, shared services, and expanded access to essential infrastructure. Our actions support municipalities with data-driven tools, targeted assistance, and collaboration across local, regional, and state partners. And our annual indicator is public school enrollment. For enhanced energy, we have policies that promote fuel switching, conservation, reduced consumption, citing renewable sources to align with orderly development. And the actions focus on achievement of regional energy targets. Targets in many cases for housing or enhanced energy that have been established by the state. Right? So not necessarily targets that we as a regional planning commission are creating. And so our annual indicator for enhanced energy are the number of cold climate heat pumps. In terms of the working landscape, our policies support the viability of agricultural and forestry industries and the protection of both from development. The actions aim to assist municipalities in stemming parcelization and collaboration with partners to support these industries. And our indicator is the number of farms. For natural resources, our policies promote the protection and conservation of natural resources and the restoration of impaired surface waters. Our actions focus on achievement of phosphorus reduction targets and the 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 state conservation goals. Our indicator there is the number of impaired waterways. And then finally, with climate resilience, we have policies that support proactive mitigation investments aimed at reducing risk and increasing resilience to natural disasters. The actions involve development and implementing plans, studies, and agreements that empower towns. And then our indicator there is active participation in the Regional Emergency Management Committee. So that's a lot. The statutory requirements for what's to be included in this plan are very broad. It covers a lot of material. And in addition to kind of serving as a vision for what we'd like to see in terms of community economic development in the region, the plan also plays a regulatory role when it comes to development review. Other than that, this is not a regulatory tool. So in terms of development review, the Regional Planning Commission is a statutory party to all development that is subject to Act 250 and Section 248 permitting in the region. And the Regional Planning Commission conducts its development reviews in accordance with its adopted application review policy. So in terms of Act 250, any Act 250 applications in the region are assessed by the RPC for conformance with the regional plan and whether the activity would constitute substantial regional impact. In most cases, the regional plan and the local town plans will align, but if they don't, the regional plan will take precedence only when the Act 250 development is found to have a substantial regional impact. Okay, and the definition for what constitutes a substantial regional impact is outlined in the plan. In terms of Section 248 applications for renewable energy, those are assessed for conformance with the regional plan and orderly development. That conformance is evaluated against regional siting standards and maps that identify prime areas with no known constraints and secondary areas with potential constraints that may require mitigation. And again, those regional siting standards are outlined in the plan. And then finally, in terms of Section 248A applications for telecommunications projects, those are assessed again for conformance with the regional plan and orderly development. They are evaluated against regional siting standards, which are designed to protect the environment when siting telecommunications infrastructure in the region. Yeah.
Just want to make a point of clarification when it comes to the development review. When we speak about the Regional Planning Commission, we are not speaking about the staff. Development review is done by the Board of Commissioners. And actually tonight, most of our board is here because we have Board of Commissioners meeting following this public hearing. So when we talk about the development review, that is done by each municipality's representative to the Board of Commission with support from the staff by providing information and review of the applications, which can be extensive. So it's just important to know that towns actually are the ones doing that development review, not the Planning Commission staff itself. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that ends the presentation. I'm sorry if it went a little bit over.
Perfect.
But now in terms of the the public comments section of this hearing. The RPC is seeking general or specific comments on whether the plan conforms to the state planning goals as outlined in statute. Questions or other input will be accepted after all comments on the above have been discussed. Because really that's the point of the hearing tonight, is to make sure that we receive any feedback regarding whether or not the plan conforms with state planning goals. So once we've kind of exhausted that topic, if there are other questions or input about other matters that folks want to talk about, you know, we can do that. In terms of the guidelines for hearing participation, you know, just ask that folks raise their hand to be recognized, whether you're in person or virtual, and then state your name for the record. And, you know, expect that if you have a detailed comment or question, we may offer to schedule a time following the, you know, the hearing in order to fully respond to that. So I'll turn that over, everything over to Devin to facilitate the public comment section.
Why don't we start? Yeah.
I'm David Crane from Sudbury, Vermont.
Good to see you, David.
Good to see you. For the novices like myself that are here this evening, maybe you could give us a little bit of information on who is Rutland Regional Planning Commission? Are they a state entity? Are they a nonprofit? Do they have the ability through the influence of the state to override our local zoning that we would create? I'm a very independent person. I like to see it created locally.
Yeah.
And that's really it. And I just need to know, I don't know who I'm hearing from.
Yeah, so I will answer that question, even though I think it sort of goes outside that early area.
You can wait.
It's a quick answer. So we are a political subdivision of the state of Vermont. So we're a quasi municipality that way. So we're a unique regional entity that really only exists at a couple levels. So in that case, because we are a regional entity, we have staffing that of course exists under the direction of the executive director. And I operate under the direction of the Executive Finance Committee, which is formed by the Board of Commissioners. Board of Commissioners are appointed by the legislative bodies in each of our 27 towns. They dictate and guide the sort of processes, policies, and work of the Regional Planning Commission overall. In terms of your element of, do we override local land use regulations? Absolutely not. Oftentimes, we work directly with your planning commissions to help design and develop and implement those local land use regulations. This regional future land use map does not override local zoning. If anything, it helps further support local zoning, especially in these Tier 1B eligible areas where Act 250 will be removed, and it will only be local zoning that will govern development in a municipality.
Thank you. I'm sorry I spoke out of.
No, that's perfect. That's a great global question, and it does relate to the map as well in terms of the functionality. Other questions? Yeah, be Tom.
Hey, thanks, Devin. I'm Tom Fuller. I'm a select board member from the town of Danby. I'm here representing the town. Could I have Stephanie pull up the map of Danby, the flu map?
So, can you pull up the flu map?
With and blow up Danby.
Yep.
Oh, okay, sorry. Stop sharing my screen. Wow. Great.
And if you could include Mount Tabor in the blow up, since Matt's sitting right next to me, then we could maybe cover a few towns at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
That the general area?
Yeah, no, I think that would work great. Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay, you're welcome.
I think our first concern, which we've passed on to you right along, is the enterprise area that's overlapping our town's water supply area. And I guess my question is, how did that development, like, where did we come up with down below there, we made one area conservation as opposed to enterprise. And then we took the whole mountainside and made that enterprise. And I know there is the small active marble quarry there, but it's not the 1,200 acres there. And then we're overlapping onto our actual town's water system.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom, because it relates directly to one of the changes we implemented from pre-application draft of the future land use map to this first public hearing draft. And that is, we heard definitively from the land use review board that we should be mapping at the parcel level. So that large enterprise area that you see is one contiguous parcel. In our pre-application draft, we did not do that. We cut parcels to sort of be more real with the landscape, like you're sort of describing, where the quarry itself sits on a small portion of this large parcel. However, and this actually makes sense, the land use review board said, we would like to see things snapped to parcel. That's the terminology we use when we sort of map at the parcel level, because it may create some conflicts and confusion if a landowner were to try to do something on their land. And this really only relates to if they fall into tier 1B or not. And not having clear definition as to where those lines are, right? Because there's no surveys, there's no sort of data associated with where these breaks may be on a parcel. So as a general sort of mapping methodology, wherever possible, we tried to include the entire parcel. So that's why you're seeing it this way. Another sort of element that you describe is, you know, why is there this sort of pocket of green and this sort of sea of blue? We also, in this map, tried to, based on commentary from the LURB, they asked us to try to combine land use areas wherever parcel to create contiguous blocks of land, and sort of, instead of little isolated pockets all over the map, like we had in our first draft for the pre-application phase. In terms of this, that was the attempt here. And I think that, I don't know the specific details on that one individual parcel without looking at the data. But generally, that's why you're seeing the sort of change between the drafts.
So I guess, and Matt and I think agree on this. If you take any of the Route 7 corridor area,
Sure.
which we considered the prime areas for the enterprise area, we ended up with a lot of green in those areas, which in future uses, and I've got a million questions here, so hopefully I can keep them short. That's gonna hurt us on development along this Route 7 corridor, correct?
No. So one thing that's really important to understand with this map is that in terms of a regulatory authority, this map only maps tier 1B eligible areas. Every other, so those are our core four: downtown centers, village areas, and planned growth areas. Every other color on this map, from enterprise to resource-based rec to rural general, ag and forestry, or conservation, are treated the exact same way with respect to Act 250. You are going to fall into what we are calling status quo. If you fell into Act 250 before, you're going to fall into Act 250 now, if you're a 1 acre town or a 10 acre town.
So a conservation area along Route 7, even though it's in conservation, is not going to be considered in an Act 250 hearing as out of compliance or non-conforming.
Right. The more important element as it respects to our rural categories are what the plan policies say. And our plan policies are clear that we do not restrict growth in any land use category. What we do say is we need context sensitive growth. So let's not put a Walmart in a rural conservation area. It's more, as Stephanie had mentioned during her presentation, lower density growth that's appropriate for Danby or Mount Tabor, right? Which is rural residential, rural business, and some light industry or heavy industry if you're like targeting around a mineral resource like your sand and gravel pit.
Oh, I guess in this mapping, do you see, and I know this is a tough question, where Danby and Mount Tabor are gaining from the new flu mapping? Is there any potential benefit to us here?
No. Yeah, you are not eligible for tier 1B because you guys lack the prerequisites. So this, in terms of the Act 250 jurisdictional benefit, does not apply to Danby and Mount Tabor.
Is there any way?
Yeah, so you currently have a designated village center, right?
Which doesn't qualify under the zoning or the wastewater.
Right, but you still, in terms of the designation, that is a benefit for potential resources for like historic preservation or redevelopment. When you have a village center like you guys have, that's pre-existing, a legacy village center, just as it did before, it still opens the door for potential historic tax credits and other benefits associated with like land use regulations or, funding, essentially.
The area in Danby, the legacy able to be expanded at all?
I believe slightly, but not in a significant way.
But did Mount Tabor receive a new village center?
Yes, because it expanded over the line now into Mount Tabor, where Mount Tabor didn't have a village center before. However, those benefits don't extend to you guys because you aren't a legacy. This gets really complicated quick, so I'll try not to get into it, but there are steps to the designation program. If you're a legacy designation, you come in at a higher step than if you were just mapped without going through the process before. And, we could talk more about that offline, what that all means and getting through the steps. But one thing that was really cool about this new Act 2021 process is it gave regional planning commissions the ability, in combination with towns, to map new village centers without a town having to go through the laborious application process as before.
I guess to follow up on that, if we don't meet the criteria of, let's just use the zoning and the septic, and it's not really any historical sites up there, are we just putting things on a map for no reason at that point?
That's open to interpretation.
Okay.
We are required to do so, but in terms of Act 250, it is limited to those tier 1B eligible areas that we laid out.
Right.
I do want to open it up to a few more questions. We can always come back to you. Is that a hand?
No.
Oh, just hanging out.
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Yep.
I
I have a hand.
Is this Bill?
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead,
Can
Bill.
hear. Yeah, so Mount Tabor's 94% national forest.
Correct.
So you, by looking at this, we just want it to be just not a place where anyone can develop anything. I mean, so basically, the land that's been in my family for over 100 years is you're dictating what I'm going to do with that land going forward. I have no say. Looking at this, my land, for some reason, even my house has been divvied out. You can look at this map. I'm that little green spot in the middle of the yellow. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Bill, as I had mentioned before, this does not restrict your ability to utilize your land in any way. If you fell into Act 250 before your development, it will still fall into Act 250 now. If you want to build a house, do anything that you would normally want to do on your land, this does not restrict that. These mapping categories in the rural districts were created using a methodology developed by all regional planning commissions in the state of Vermont. And really what it is intended to do is visualize where priorities should and could be, but it does not mandate that to happen. what I mean by that is you see a lot of rural conservation on the map. That is saying these areas are considered high priority interior forests, high priority wildlife corridors. They've been mapped by the state of Vermont as high value natural resources. So if you, Bill, as a landowner, wanted to voluntarily, go have your land go into a conservation easement, we're saying this would be a good spot. If you don't, that is completely up to you. If you want to build a house, if you want to do anything on your land, you can do that. You will have to follow your local land use regs. In Mount Tabor, you don't have zoning, so that doesn't matter. If it activated Act 250, you'd have to go through Act 250. But this map would not limit your ability to do that. I think there's been a lot of confusion around what these land use categories mean for a landowner.
I think you're 1,000% correct. There's been a lot of confusion, and I think that's been intentional. And I'm not. I don't want this. I don't even know who you are. We don't know each other, so I don't mean this to come out as being hostile. I just mean this as this land. We're in a really difficult spot in the state of Vermont right now. We've created this because for some reason we want this utopia. We want this place where nobody will ever want to build anything. And I'm going off, but I still, when I look at my little spot on the west side of Route 7, and Matt's, it's like, who made the decision to separate my little world green in the midst of all the yellow or whatever that color is, tan. I mean, here we are. Obviously, had I known and been aware of this process before, here I sit tonight. I would have loved to have sat there before, but it just feels like this hasn't been very transparent up to this point, and here we are. So, but I appreciate all your efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. One note on that, we did meet with every single town when we drafted our pre-application draft of the plan, and most towns we met multiple times and had a lot of back and forth. We decided that we would work through the select boards in developing this map, knowing that and providing the disclaimer that the land use review board ultimately holds the power to approve or disapprove this plan. And we do need to listen and follow their instruction when developing this map, or else we will not have a map or a regional plan, which is critical in many, many aspects for being able to approve town plans, giving towns who are eligible for Tier 1B those exemptions so they can spur development, and many more elements. So, Bill, I understand your frustration. I think it lies a lot with this piece of legislation, which is you're in good company that way. I think a lot of people feel that way, and I understand. So, Annette, I see you have a hand as well. We cannot hear you, Annette. Okay, well, Annette is figuring out her. We'll go to some folks in the room. Go ahead, Rob.
Rob Steele, is there any way we can go back to the slide that showed the 6% that were 1B capable on here?
6% was the entire high density growth. 2% is the Tier 1B eligible.
Okay, so out of all of Rutland County, you have 2% that's Tier 1B eligible. That leaves 98%
Not
to be either Tier 2 or Tier 3, correct?
correct. Yeah.
So, well, you're talking about housing and economic development. What pushback have you given on Act 181 or trying to stop Act 181 from continuing? Because for 98% of the area in Rutland County, there's going to be increased Act 250 on any kind of housing or economic development from this point moving forward.
Yeah, understood. So the 2% land falling into Tier 1B has been about the state average across the state. Obviously, Chittenden County has a much bigger number, but every other region that we work with is reporting about the same number. So we agree. The interpretation of the statute so far has been pretty limited. Now, to your point about tier 3 and road rule and those other elements, we're not talking about those tonight because those lie with the jurisdiction of the Land Use Review Board. Those are not elements that exist in our plan or on our map because those are not under the authority or mandate of the Regional Planning Commission. To your point about advocacy, we strongly support and encourage folks to use their right to engage with legislators and the Land Use Review Board to provide that kind of feedback. Our mandate is to do the work under Act 181, and we're trying to do that. But we understand that right now the balance may not be right. So appreciate that, Rob. You had a question? I just 1 second before you start. Annette, were you able to get your?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so the Danby Select Board has looked at a map in July and last week. That's the only interaction the town has had. Those of us who are members of the public who participate virtually can't see the maps because the Select Board has not allowed a camera. So we really have not had a good process in Danby around looking at these maps. Nevertheless, after the first meeting, I wrote to the Regional Planning Commission and said, we need our source protection area added to the map. And the person said, well, there are other ways to look at that. But I've talked to someone in another town, in another Regional Planning Commission, that said they got their source protection area added to the map. That goes to Tom's point about the very large parcel that is the enterprise area. After that came up last Thursday at the Danby Select Board meeting, I attended the LURB meeting yesterday and I asked them about it. And the chair said, we are not requiring that it be the entire parcel. Now, maybe that's changed. And I know that you're going back next Monday, but I think you need to get clarification on it. She was very clear that they are not requiring the whole parcel. And I think it's a mistake to have all of Dorset Mountain practically shown as an enterprise zone. My third comment is that regarding the village, there is an interest in the people who live on the southern part of Main Street in restoring the village that was removed, the part of the village that was removed in 2016. There may be some historic homes down there, and it was removed, and they'd like to have that put back. And if there's some benefit financially in terms of grants, that would be very helpful. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Annette. Yeah, we did receive a request from Danby Select Board to consider mapping those source protection areas, and we do plan to include that in our map update. In terms of the village center designate or village center expansion to the south, let's have a conversation about what that includes. But we would be looking for the Select Board to make that final request. Let's go to Roy.
Roy Newton Castleton. In reference to that gentleman you just spoke from Mount Tabor, with your map, or the individual tells us here, all of a sudden you put a green spot on his property or whatever. And what's going to happen? He wants to do something with his land. He has to go before the Act 250 board. And the first thing that the Act 250 board is going to do is they're going to look at your map and say, oh, this is green. And that's the end of that.
So that is not the way the process is intended to be laid out. The Act 250 Commission is going to defer.
That's what they will do.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that. So, we have some more online hands. B. Turner.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I had posted a couple of questions in the chat. I'll just go through those quickly, kind of playing off. It seems like a lot of people have similar questions. Can you just explain again how the tiers work and what's limited by each tier? Seems like you're saying you're only focusing on the various sections of tier 1 and omitting tier 2 and tier 3 completely. Is that right?
That is right, because tier 2 and tier 3 that jurisdiction and rulemaking lies with the Land Use Review Board and is
Yep.
still in process. So
And-
the Land Use Review Board has not completed that rulemaking. And there is emerging legislation right now seeking to delay that rulemaking for another couple of years for both the
Mhm.
road rule and under
Yeah.
tier 2 and tier 3.
Okay. And who is that board? Is that the legislatively appointed board?
That's the governor appointed board of 5 members. You can, if you just Google Land Use Review Board Vermont, you will see their page and all their resources and contacts.
So, I think everybody's kind of highlighted. Okay, so you have 9 out of 11 regional planning commission or boards throughout the state. 9 of them have less than 2.5% of usable land. That doesn't sound like a healthy, vibrant, economic environment for growth development, as well as kind of making room for conservation, does it?
Yeah, that is one interpretation, but no one is saying that land is not usable out of tier 1B. In fact, rural
No,
development
No,
is
I'm saying
encouraged.
the how much land is in tier 2 and tier 3? About 90 some odd percent?
So it would be 98% will fall into one of those 2 categories.
Right. So land that falls in those categories falls under the Act 250 restrictions, correct?
Correct.
As Act 250 as part of this overhaul, was Act 250 revised and kind of what they'll call enhanced, making it more difficult or easier, or no change?
So there still are 10 criteria, but again, any rules around it, tier 2 and tier 3 have yet to be developed.
Yeah. Okay. It seems like this legislation, it was reported on an article online that it was kind of backed into, but that the economic consequences of the framework weren't really flushed out until after the vote was made. And then you had this, this tier 1 eligibility was determined, and land use review board approval. You had this distributional effects only became clear once those maps were drafted. And by then the statutory framework was put and locked in place. I mean, this doesn't seem like you can understand, I think, how people are like very concerned about what this is going to do, what this does to their property value. And, if tier 2 and tier 3 are really restricted, you're gonna further depress the Vermont economic situation. You're gonna put property taxes into a death spiral. The state school budget, statewide school funding is already, for Castleton, it's reported as being 80% of the property tax. That's insane. You want to know why
Yeah,
we have
we-
a housing crisis? Because people can't afford to buy houses.
Yeah. You understand, again, this is sort of the,
Territory
yeah.
and not our territory.
Yeah, so we're really focused on those mandates that we are required to consider under statute, but we understand and again, encourage you to consider talking to your legislators and the land use review board.
Yeah, can you guys also send the message back so they get it from both ends?
That could be a request made to our regional commission, yes.
Okay, how do I make that?
You can send that to me and I'll pass it along to our board.
Sorry, you are again, Devin?
I am the exec, yep, yes. You can
Oh,
find,
sorry,
yep, you can find contact information on our website, or it's just devin@rutlandrpc.org.
okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna go
it's
do a new
just-
question. Thank you. Is it Brad? All right, Tom, we'll circle back to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Brown Limmer from Sudbury. We have 6 people here from Sudbury. I think you're familiar with our difficulties in Sudbury.
Sure am, yeah.
our stance, and I think I speak for the group that's here at least tonight, if not a great faction in Sudbury, is that we think that rural development is an oxymoron. We're a tiny little town, less than 700 people. And, many of us are living there for what Sudbury does not have. You know, we don't have a fire department, and we don't have a school. We don't have a post office, don't have a gas station, general store. You know, we're basically just trying to live with the peace and quiet of country living in Sudbury. So we have a village center designation, as you're aware, Devin, that was granted last April. And there is a groundswell of support for changing the boundaries of that village center designation so that it encompasses only publicly held land, which would be equivalent to 1 acre where the meeting house and the town clerk and the town green sits.
Mhm.
It is not that now. And you came and we talked about how it is that that could be changed. And you said it could be changed and that we needed to have the select board let you know that it needed to be changed. That was the will of the people.
Correct.
There's currently a petition that's circulating in town for that to happen. We have over 60 signatures on that petition.
Yes.
And the select board is saying now that they understood that it was more complicated, the process, than just a simple letter to the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. So my question is, what's the process? How can we get that done?
Exactly as you laid out, a letter from the select board.
A letter from the select board, so we do not need to have a public meeting. We do not have to have it warned that it's, you know, gonna be a change of our town plan. Yada, yada, yada.
Right.
All right, that's good. Now, my second question is, there's 14 towns, you said, with tier 1B jurisdiction
Eligibility.
eligibility,
Yep.
correct? And, what are they?
Back to the slide. Sure. I probably can name them by memory, but
Well, that's why I was relying on you to do that. I can't see it from here.
so it's Brandon, Benson, Pittsford, Killington, Proctor, Rutland City, West Rutland, Castleton, Fairhaven, Pulteney, Shrewsbury, Wallingford, and Pollitt. Mendon, sorry. Forgot about Mendon.
And
Just to
where?
be clear, these are the areas that are eligible. It
Right.
doesn't mean that the towns have opted in and requested that jurisdiction.
Yeah, the
These are
statute,
the areas that are eligible.
so towns under statute have to opt in to be tier 1B through a municipal resolution.
All right.
So far, we've received only a few of those resolutions.
So village center designations and the 1/4 mile extension beyond the village center designation does not automatically put them into 1B.
No, that was the interim exemption, which will go away once our plan is adopted.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. Roy, you got another one?
Thank you.
Roy Newton
You're
again,
welcome. Thank you. Yeah,
Castleton.
Mark, will get you.
I'm confused. You're telling us here that tier 1 is what you're talking about. And tier 2 and tier 3 have not been done yet. So my question is, why were you only talking about tier 1? Why are you changing all the maps on these other towns?
We're only talking about tier 1 because that is the only mandate regional planning commissions have with this map to map. Tier 2 and tier 3 live in the land use review board.
But aren't you changing all the maps? Or a lot of them with this update?
It is a comprehensive overhaul of the future land use map for the region. Yes. So we as a regional planning commission have had a future land use map since 1971. The difference with this map through Act 91 is now all regional planning commissions will map the same categories in the same color using the same methodology. So in theory, when this is all done at the end of 2026, you can go online and see a complete future land use map for the entire state of Vermont that all conforms to the same methods and areas, whereas before, every region mapped it completely different in every different way. So this provided some consistency across the state. Yeah, Mark.
Could you summarize regional impact, substantial regional impact? I'm just curious whether that criteria has changed over the years or is changing because of this new mission.
Yes. So substantial regional impact has always been a criteria for us reviewing regional Act 250 applications. The biggest misconception out there is that it automatically means a bad thing. Substantial regional impact just means it's a big project, whether it's good or bad. So it gives us a foot in the door to say, hey, this project is big enough that the Regional Planning Commission and all our 27 members would like to weigh in and provide some feedback. So that currently our regional plan, it's very simple and actually kind of annoying to work with. You can ask any of our regional commissioners. The statement is simple. It says, does the project impact 2 or more towns? Now, what does that mean? That is all the sentence says. In our new criteria, which I can't say verbatim because there's about 7 or 10 steps that sort of look at things like impacts on a municipal budget, impacts on roadways, impacts on the energy grid, sort of things that may result in increased municipal costs that the town should really know about and make sure that this tax revenue from a new development will at least cover it, or the town is aware going in that, hey, in Danby or in, Shrewsbury, your school is about to get potentially overrun, or your highway garage because of this, the requirements of this new development. Or it might not have any impact whatsoever, and the town and the Regional Planning Commission, everyone's like, great, we want this development, no problem. It is important to know that there has not been a denied or opposed Act 250 application in our region in a very long time. We are a very pro-development region as a whole, and this plan intends to continue that legacy to say, Rutland needs business. We need residents. We need homes. This plan is trying to spur and encourage that. Of course, again, context sensitive, right? As you said, Sudbury, you want to remain Sudbury. Okay, then let's do that. Brandon, Rutland City, they may be more capable and able of handling much more dense development. That's where it needs to go. So this is the balance we talked about with this sort of flexible, locally led plan is how do we balance Mount Tabor's needs with 210 people with Rutland City of 16,000? That's a challenge, right? But this plan really tries to do that and consider those kind of needs. Yeah.
To follow up though, you also talked about how everything is getting reduced to the 2-dimensional parcel.
Yeah.
Basically. So if there's substantial impact that goes beyond those boundaries, how is that dealt with? I mean,
yeah, so the mapping may be at the 2-dimensional parcel level, but in terms of our review of Act 250, that's much more global, right? That's considering all the plan policies and sort of like the scale of the development. So
okay, so but you pointed out that, and in my experience, it hasn't been done in a long time. Anyone's really challenged or done anything with substantial regional impact. I'm just here tonight to say I'm still very concerned about the night sky in the Rutland Valley, that you cannot see it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah,
it's a new moon. Last night, it was a new moon. That means no moon. It was cloudy. That means it should be dark. It was not dark because Rutland is lighting up the whole valley. So that's my comment, that you have to go beyond the two-dimensional here.
Move to Sudbury.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
The problem is, I can't afford to move to Sudbury because I live in Shrewsbury. So that's the point is, that
Go ahead.
it's a
Yeah,
regional impact.
thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Tom Murphy, I just want to know, is there a place that we can find the existing rules around town centers and all that versus 1B or 1A, that's proposed? Where would that be on the site that we see the before and then the after?
The before and after in what way? Sorry, can you
Well,
clarify?
181 is suggesting that there's certain areas like 1B, 2, and there, right? So that's what the rule is. But if we don't accept, or if the town, or my town doesn't accept that, what does it fall back to? What is the before and after?
Yeah, it doesn't quite work that way. I'm sorry. I may not be understanding your question, but the future map, land use map is the region as a whole. So there's no sort of like opting in or out of being mapped, right? That it all has to be mapped, just like our former future land use map. We have to map the whole region because it is the regional planning commission. We can't really compare apples to oranges here because, like I said, our former future land use map didn't have any of the same criteria for land use areas that we do now. So we're really starting fresh that way. None of this framework existed before now. Does that make sense?
Are you looking for a statutory reference?
Yeah, like,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah,
About like what is underpinning
Yeah.
these land.
24 VSA section 4302 is a good place to start.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, the land use category, the new land use categories are defined in statute. So it's not like the Regional Planning Commission could just willy-nilly decide where they wanted a downtown center to be based on, attributes in a community. That
would be great.
there's pretty strict criteria in order to be eligible for an area to be mapped as one of these Act 181 established land use categories. And the definitions for them are all laid out in statute.
And
Yeah.
And to your point, our pre-application draft had about 2.5% of the region mapped in Tier 1B eligible. And after the LURB review, it was reduced down to 2%. So we are trying, and our intent is to expand these areas to as big as statutorily allowable, because we want to maintain the biggest benefit possible. See, we have a hand online.
Yeah,
the
hi.
same-
Could you,
Go ahead.
sorry, could you go back to the map that that you were looking at with the prior question that had the various towns in the tier 1?
Oh, Tier
And then
1B.
the lower right-hand corner, it referenced the 2%. If you go back to that.
Yeah, 1 second. There you go.
Yeah, this one. So this says tier 1B areas in downtown villages and planned growth areas and villages, right? Then it says Act 250 exemptions apply to housing and mixed use developments of 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less. So I just want to confirm, what are the restrictions or benefits of tier 1B? Is it only those sorts of developments that Act 250 doesn't apply to, or are there other things? Is there anything in tier 1B?
That's correct. So what is laid out on that slide is what is the jurisdiction in Act 250. Now, a community can apply for Tier 1A once our plan is adopted. Tier 1A is full exemption to Act 250. We expect that to be limited to only the largest municipalities in Vermont, like Rutland City. Now, we don't know. Those applications go directly to the Land Use Review Board. Again, the Regional Planning Commission is not involved in that process. We do know that Rutland City is planning to apply. We do not expect there's likely many others in our region, if any, for Tier 1A, which is full Act 250 exemption.
Okay, so just to reiterate, tier 1 would be full exemption from Act 250. tier
Tier
1B
1A.
would be exemption from Act 250 only if you were doing one of those housing projects that you outlined there. Is that correct?
Yep, housing or mixed
Oth-
use 50 units.
So,
or less
so
than 10%.
otherwise, tier 1B is subject to Act 250.
Yes, the same way it would be before. Yep,
Okay,
great question.
thank you.
Jack Schneider from Brandon. When the plan gets approved, the regional plan gets approved in May, do the Act 180 exemptions go into effect immediately for tier B?
Not until the land use review board approves our plan. So within 15 days of adoption, we have to send our adopted plan to the land use review board, and they have 60 days to review it and approve it. The process with the pre-application process was intended to sort of expedite that final approval, sort of considering that we've already gone through a review process with the LURB.
Thank you.
But
David Crane, Sudbury again. Sometimes things happen very slow and you don't really see that you're losing traction. I don't know if anyone else has a concern that the state takes, and I think you guys are very genuine and good people. I really do. But a 92-year-old customer of mine recently said that Montpelier is almost in Vermont. Okay, so with that said, are you guys getting used? And I don't want to go too far into a conspiracy theory, but do you feel like the potential that you're being used as pawns in a greater game to sort of do land grabs to prevent development in certain areas and want it in others? I'm very concerned. I don't trust.
I think that's super far afield of tonight's conversation. I appreciate the concept and the idea, but I can't answer that. Yeah, I think 99% of the work that we do here is focused entirely on helping towns like Sudbury.
I agree with that.
And we are not legislators,
Right.
and I think that's where the focus needs to lie is, these are laws that are implemented through tools like regional planning commissions. We try to maintain that our focus is on Rutland region and the towns and work within that framework the best we can, because it's what we're dealt. It's what we're dealt.
Yeah.
Because as I listen, I don't listen to you say things that are coming up the conduit. I hear you telling us things that are coming down the conduit.
Yeah.
And the conduit comes to you, to us, but we have to do special requests to get it to go to the conduit to get to the top.
Sure.
And just to kind of put it out there for optics, it leaves a funny feeling in you at times. And again, I think you guys are genuine people, and
No, I appreciate that. And we could talk about this all night.
It has to do with these maps. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
We're only discussing the tier 1 tonight, but we're mapping the tier 2 and 3s as
No.
well.
We are not mapping tier 3.
So the green, the conservation areas,
Nothing to do with tier 3.
so
The
those-
land use review board will overlay with a tier 3 map. There is a draft map out now, but like I said, the rulemaking's not done. It's likely to get delayed if the legislature chooses so. That tier 3 area is designed based on an entirely different set of criteria. So
the conservation
will not,
general is not a tier 3.
no, not at all. This will not put you into tier 3. Folks, understand all rural areas for our purposes are treated the exact same way. And now, if you look, you can go online, the Land Use Review Board, and see what the draft tier 3 map looks like. There's very little crossover from our map to their map. Very little. They're mapping very specific things like headwater streams. And I don't want to go too far into tier 3 because really that
Right,
is
no.
outside of this purview. But no, that is not tier 3. Yeah. Yeah,
I have a
let's
question.
sure.
Okay, so we have Act 250. That's all set. It's 1970. Same old, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Now we have Act 181 that is only been in effect since what, October 2024, whenever they passed it.
June, yep.
June, okay. So that's where the tier 1B and the tier 1A is coming from, correct?
Mhm.
So once now that that's passed, my question is, when someone in, say, Castleton has a piece of land that falls under that tier 1B, where does that approval go to? Does that go automatically to that 5 commissioner verb? Or is that still going to the local?
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's gonna run through local zoning
Okay.
as it would
Okay.
normally. Yeah, great question, Liz. This does not supersede local zoning. That's, local zoning actually is empowered even further if you remove Act 250 from the
Right, so
equation.
that's making Act 250 now, not the owner of that land, now 181 saying that we can develop that land, right?
Yeah, it's gonna, whatever your local land use regulations are, that's what will govern the development.
If Castleton opts in.
Right.
We-
If
Or
you opt
Rutland
in
receives an exception.
to tier 1B.
If Castleton
Can you
doesn't.
tell us what the benefits are for opting in and what the negatives are for opting in?
So the benefits are outlined right there. So 50 housing or mixed use of 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less would be exempt from Act 250 and only under the authority of local zoning. I don't know what the negatives are. That's a local decision.
It's always a local decision. The state can't say, well, that's a tier 1B and you have to accept that now.
No.
Okay.
No, gross. I see one more hand online.
Yeah, hi, sorry. This land review board, you said, has not been formed yet, correct?
No, it's been formed and has existed for a little over a year.
And it's appointed by the governor?
That's correct.
Do they have a term that's attached to that?
I don't know.
They do.
When the my concern would be when the governor changes, can the new governor just implement new board members?
So while I appreciate these questions on the land use review board, again, we are
Direct
here
them to
tonight
land
to
use
talk
review
about
board.
the future land use map and the regional plan. So check out that website. Direct your questions to the LURB. Let's try to focus on this plan and map. Again, there's a lot. But, I want to be respectful of folks' time. We've been going for an hour and a half.
Any final, like any specifics about performance with the state planning goals?
In the engagement strategy that you pointed out, do you guys feel it was successful?
Yeah, as best as it can be, given what we're able to do with our staff and our daily workload and our resources. Yeah. This is the biggest public engagement effort this organization's ever undertaken by a long shot. We've held hundreds of meetings, dozens of events over a 3-year period. Because remember, we developed this plan started this plan before Act 181 was even an idea.
See, because my concern is I'm getting a lot of calls from people who knew nothing about this last minute. And so I'm asking if you felt it was successful with the towns, because I think a lot of the residents in Danby don't feel it was a successful engagement to the actual general public.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we made every effort
Right.
given our capacity. And I think some of the recent sort of awareness maybe sort of driven by some other things that are happening at the state level. Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
Devin, can I speak to his question too?
Yeah, sure.
So town of Pittsburgh has been a thorn in Devin's side since this started. Oh, we've been heavily.
I'd say it's a light tickle. Not a-
We've been heavily invested in this. I have a very passionate select board. I have a very passionate planning commission. Their passions don't always align. But I will say that we have emailed and shown up for most of the process over the last year. I think it depends on who you have in your leadership in your town.
and who's driving the bus on how much they got involved with it. I mean, I know the town I actually live in, not as involved, but the town that I work for and manage, very involved because of the players I can. So I think depending on your town is how much you got out of their engagement strategies and attempts. Like I got emails, I forwarded them to my board members. It's gonna depend on your town on how involved you decided to be, but there was definitely a lot of communication between Rutland Regional Planning Commission and the towns. What happened to that information once it hit your town person, whether it was your board of commissioner appointment or your leadership? I can't tell you, but I know that the town that I manage, they've been very vocal, especially the last 6 months.
Yeah, and I encourage folks who are curious about what that engagement is, read the strategy report. It's a 200-page document for a reason, sorry. So one other hand. Is that you, Liz? Or you,
With me, I was just going to say that I just get a little bit of the feeling that there's some misunderstanding about what the job of Rutland Regional Planning Commission is versus what the job of our state legislature is. So,
Yeah.
I think that we need to be arguing, fighting, or giving our opinions to the state legislature a lot more.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. I agree. Roy, last one.
I got two things. Number one, I think that these meetings ought to be paid public announcements so that people will be informed, and whatever method you can use, they should be warned meetings. Number two is you stated that there's been no denied Act 250 in Rutland County. That may be true, but you should be made aware that Green Mountain College owner, former Green Mountain College, applied for Act 250 2 or 3 years ago now. Okay. And was tied up, and they put him through the rigmarole, okay, for a place that has 20 buildings, historic nature. They've been there, I don't know how long, and they tied that man up for so long that he has now given up, and he's going to give away 20 buildings and property. That's Act 250.
Appreciate that perspective. Okay. I think we are all set, folks. Again, there's
Real quick question, Chad. You scroll up. So I just want to make sure his question got answered.
Do I correctly understand that there no ability to object or switch between rural designations, i.e. rural conservation to rural general, rural ag and forestry? Thanks. There is a process in which we've laid out working with our municipalities to make those requests, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next steps, Joel.
That's an individual choice.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep. All right. So tonight's our required first public hearing in statute. We're only required to hold one public hearing. We don't think that's enough, to your point, Roy. So we are holding 3 supplemental meetings, not here, but going out to the community. So we have March 19th in Brandon, March 24th in Wallingford, and March 26th in Poultney. We're asking that all final comments for the plan and the map are due by March 27th. Our next step in the process will be to make any revisions to the plan and map that are necessary based on those comments. Warn for the final public hearing on April 16th and hold our final public hearing on May 19th at the RRPC office, just like this, during a regional board of commissioners meeting. Our plan does set to expire in June, so we are required to get this plan over the finish line before that expiration date. We're asking that Tier 1B municipal resolutions come in before our adoption, because those have to be attached to the plan and submitted to the land use review board. So towns, those 14 towns, if you're one of them, we have reached out to your select board. We have provided the resolution. If you want to opt in, please do so before that date. If you do not, you will not be included in the regional plan submission. Please use our website. That is the resource. We have a dedicated landing page for a reason. That's where you'll find information on these meetings. There's also a virtual option for all three. Is that right? Yeah, so you can find links to the virtual options for those 3 supplemental meetings. You can find the report, you can find the draft plan, you can find the engagement strategy, you can find the draft map. We also have a comparison tool online of showing how the map changed from the pre-application draft to the new draft. We are currently working on a new draft to the future land use map based on all the comments we've heard since this map's been released. We have heard that there might be too much rural conservation. We've heard directly from you guys, and we're trying to make those changes in the plan so that everyone feels good as you can be. We've heard a lot of comments about the legislation. We know about that for the final adoption. So again, thank you all so much. I've been to several of these public hearings for other regions in the state so far this year. They maybe had a handful of people. Tonight online and in person, we have 57 people. And yeah, for 60,000 region, maybe that's not much, but compared to other regions of only a handful, this is huge. So thank you for taking the time and sharing your thoughts. So commissioners, please stay. We do have a meeting.